Rockwood, sorry, yeah, I said that before. But anyhow, we would have gone further, but there's a landslide there that busted up some rails, and they got backhoes and stuff up there working on it. So we didn't get to go the last 2 or 3 miles, whatever it is, to the normal turnaround. But at the Rockwood, yeah, right. I remember the wood.
That's a good place.
Well, you know, that we rode up in the car in the front. Of course, they backed the engine around, took it on the rear. Our guy, Dan, got to ride the engine, and he said, "Stick around a minute. We're going to see 2 people in the engine." 2 of us got to ride the engine back to the roundhouse. We got the whole tour, and I think it has something to do with we have a front axle, our pilot axle. They're working on it, and they're doing some other stuff. They're rebuilding our compressor. And got a photo of the compressor and found out about that. Here it is on the table. And they say, "Oh, we bought some scrap. See that old compression down there? That's the original compression." Okay, you know, that's Klondike Mines number 4. Anyhow, I guess that's it. I had a great time. It was all on the railroad, and our railroad, I think, paid for the meals, you know, a nice meal that we had. Buy your gas to get there and get back, and get a motel room, you know. Worked for me, so we're having a blast up there at Como. And we'll see. There's rumors that we might get that thing going, you know. We're hoping that we can do that this year. It's not impossible. We haven't given up on that. They're accelerating stuff in their yards, working on stuff. So I'm heading back today.
Well, don't leave. Now, just to clarify for everybody out there, that he's talking about the Klondike Mines, former Klondike Mines locomotive number 4 that's been up at Como now for a few years, and it's having a fair amount of work done at Durango. I don't think major work.
Well, we're probably going to get some new tires. It's not a done deal. There's some kind of a problem that's outside or something. Or
yeah.
Extra money, I don't know, but they're doing bearings and everything else. The entire, what would you call it, suspension up front there that we just took off. We got to put it all back together so we can measure it so that they can get the bearings right, you know. So I'm learning that there's 1 million pieces to a steam engine, and we only have 500,000 of them disassembled right now.
Well, yeah. See, the number 4 has been down for a couple of years, and so like he said, we don't know if it's going to be running this year, but they're hoping to. Like you said, I mean, once they started taking part number 20 out of the railroad museum, one thing led to another, and every answer gave 2 more questions.
Right.
You know, it just got deeper. Well, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Glad you got the cab ride.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave,
Yes, sir.
there were some issues about the boiler and whether or not the, meet code and be suitable to operate at pressure. Is that being addressed in Durango as well?
Well,
Question
the
was about
boilers,
boiler and pressure.
yeah, the boilers in Como,
Boilers in
and
Como.
their boiler people are coming down to do their, see, we've had these people look at it, and side ride people looking at it, and now the boiler people.
So the boiler people will probably come from Durango to
Yeah.
look at the boiler
Right.
and in Como.
Yeah.
Sounds like the boiler did not,
Yeah.
but maybe part of the frame and an
Right.
axle. There may be some driving. Something like
Yeah, they're doing that, they're spending the night or two, the weekend that they come. So, forget if it's this Saturday or next.
Oh, okay.
Working, but they're coming soon.
that. Well, that's a good
It'll be
update.
the boiler people.
Good update on that. And for those that hadn't heard, I believe we may have talked about this last time. Speaking of Durango, their 481 engine was their last coal burner, and I think now they have taken that into the shop to get its conversion.
Right, we saw it in there.
That was sometime in March.
No more coal.
And well, actually, yeah, just in the last week or so, they have dismantled their coal loading ramp in Durango so that they don't even have the ramp anymore to run the tractor up there and load them in with coal. I think the story I heard from somebody I talked to, the train show was this last weekend, so there was a lot of train folk in town. You know, the yada yada was flying. But yeah, one of the guys told me that they were in a hurry to take down the loading ramp for the, can you guys not hear me back there? Do I need to have, Andy, can you turn up the house speaker or will that?
It just keeps cutting out.
Okay, okay, because it doesn't seem to be right now. All right, I'll put new batteries in. Anyway, back to the coal ramp thing. I guess they wanted to move it out of the way so that they could extend some of the shop building. That's what I was told by one of the guys in Scenic. Car shop?
Well, that's under construction, you can see that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There is a new car shop. And they're also erecting down there in Durango. So lots of things going on. And I also saw on the internet just in the last couple of days that a couple of new, possibly metal frames for passenger cars came through Antonito that are going to be sort of the starting point for some new cars. I don't think these are rebuilt of something old. I think this is metal frames for new cars. But that would be for the Cumbres at Toltec, and I guess that's going to maybe not even see those running this season. Also, Easter Sunday, the 31st of March, was the last run of the Winter Park Express, that 5-car Amtrak train that has been pretty successful and all the good amount of ski folks up to the Winter Park resort. And about a car and a half on that last train was full of friends of conductor Brad, because it was he's going to retire next fall, so this was his last skiing train. I'm hesitant to call it the ski train because this is technically the ski train, but we all call it for that anyway. So yeah, that was a good time. I went on that ride and several other people were here. How many people in this room were at the train show Saturday or Sunday? Probably half the crowd, maybe more than that. So, first time I had been since before COVID. Luckily, I didn't buy anything because I got no place to put it. Okay. What else? Could we, at this point, get everybody to put your phones on silent or stun or something like that so that they don't go off during the show, so that you don't interrupt everybody else's enjoyment of the upcoming program here from our friend Earl Knoob. And Earl, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
Loud
you
and
can
clear.
Right. It's a two-way street. That's a good thing. Well, listen, I think we're at the point where you can tell us a little bit about your program and show your show.
Well, very good.
Well, let me say right now that Andy and I did a Zoom test with Earl last night. We could not get his camera to work, so his computer is not cooperating with that. That's why you don't get to see his shining face.
Yeah, that might have something to do with being in the witness protection program that they can't show.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I call the witness protection program.
Well, anyway, good to be at the meeting here. I think in all the years I've belonged to the Rocky Club, I've never attended a meeting. So it's good to be here. I see some familiar faces out there in Zoom land. So I'm glad that they're all here. I went to work for the CNTS back in May of 1981 and worked there till full-time till May of 1997, and came back and helped a couple of times for when they got shorthanded in 2000, 2001 before finally deciding that I really needed to make a living doing something else. So what I've got here tonight is the beginnings of a massive slide scanning expedition that I've been going on. And I managed to scan the decent slides from my first 5 years working there. And from that, I edited it down to a handful that we can all look at. So if we can figure out how to make all of that work through Mr. Andy, we'll get started.
Yeah, I think if you just go to that share screen, you should be hopefully able to see it.
Well, let's see what we got here. Share screen, how about that? Let's see what happens when we punch the button. and do something. Okay. Ah, is that something that anybody can see? No.
No,
What happened here? What is going on here? Technical issues. Please stand by. Okay. Now, anybody see that?
no.
No,
It's trying.
it's trying.
Getting better.
Problem when you have coal burning computers, they're kind of slow.
Yeah, it's all worked last night.
This all did work last night, I assure you, yes. Well, it says my meeting's not responding, so that's what it's. Technology is wonderful when it works.
Got it.
There we go.
Okay. Have we got it? All right. Okay, excellent. So getting underway here, this was shot like the second day I was working for the CNTS in May of '81. Engine 489 was just being finished up in its initial overhaul and return to service. It hadn't run since about 1960. And some funding was made available to put it in service. One of the big problems up to this point with the CNTS is they had absolutely no way of doing major running gear overhauls. And getting drivers out from under the engine and working on the crown bearings was an impossibility, or turning tires or anything like that. So they were basically running engines till the running gear died, and then they go find another one that they could get running, which is essentially what has been going on here up to 81. The 483 ran till its tires were gone, and then they parked it. Got the 488 running up shortly after that. And the 484 was set aside in the end of 1980 because its driver tires were shot. And so they got the 489 and started putting it together. So the first year I was there, they were busily trying to assemble the new drop pit in the new shop. This is the new shop building, which might look a little different than it does now because it really had white walls at one time. And it had skylights that actually let the sunlight in. That was quite amazing. Life changed a little bit through the years here.
Well, we're wondering if you could maybe click that up towards the top, it says slideshow, and we're thinking that might make it a little bit more full screen for us.
Let's see what are we trying to do here?
A slideshow up kind of towards the top there. Up towards the top there, right just about where you were with the mouse. Up at the top of the
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything right here.
Yeah, if you go to the top, just above where the actual picture is, there should be kind of that grayish blue bar. It should say slideshow there.
No, that didn't do it.
Uh-oh.
Won't get better.
Now we got that gray bar again. So you're not seeing a slideshow gun up at the top of that?
Okay. No, all I've got here across the top is it says my screen sharing is being paused.
Oh.
Huh. It says please remove this window away from shared application. I have no idea what that is.
I just try doing that. See if we get it back.
Oh, how about resume share? How's that?
There we go.
All right, I know. I'd like to make.
Go kind of towards the left side of the actual picture there and go up a little bit.
See, I don't have anything over here, just the picture. See, that's all I've got.
You see the picture. Okay.
I guess we'll just, deal with what we got then.
See what we got here. We'll, if anybody's got a better idea on how this works.
Yeah, because it's showing you something different than what we're seeing, I guess.
Okay, hide thumbnail.
So Earl has an older computer too.
Yeah, the Windows 7.
Windows 7.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's ancient history here. So it's not showing very big on your screen. Is that what the deal is?
Yeah, so if you go down with the mouse just slightly, oh, you were down at the bottom, there's some little arrows. Do you see those at all, or?
No, all I see on the right side is the list of folks that are signed on.
Oh, okay, so it looks like you're on a different screen than what we're seeing, so.
No, he means way over here. If he could make that go away, that would.
Well, I guess we'll just, yeah, just keep going, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. Wish I knew how to fix that. See, I got, let's. Well, dang it.
I guess we just move the mouse just real slowly to the right there. Yeah, just keep going to the right just a little bit, a little more. Whoop, too far. Go back, come back a little bit more to the left, a little bit more, and then try clicking right on that.
It's thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's thinking about it. Uh-oh, my lights went out.
It's trying.
It's trying, it's thinking about it. That any better?
We're still kind of waiting for it to show up on this end.
Okay, see, it's constantly it's changing the slides as it goes. It's not allowing me.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and hit escape on that then. Or the escape button.
If I can. Or how I go back on that.
Okay.
Does that do anything for you?
A little bit bigger, yeah. Now it's too big. Yeah, we're right about there.
Right there? Okay, well, that's the manual zoom on this thing. So
Okay.
if that works for you, so be it. All right. Where were we? Oh, okay. 488 got itself a new set of rod bushings that summer or that winter. And around the last week of May, they fired it up and ran a test run up to the top of the hill and back with it just to make sure it wasn't running hot. And for you fans of all of this, you may notice that the 488 has a wooden beam snowplow on it, which for years was on engine 487. And 487, we were at this time we were on the old boiler inspection law rules, which gave you 5 years of flue time on an engine, and then after the 5th year, you either put new flues in the engine or you could apply for an extension. And an extension required you to open up the front of the open up the smoke box, take all the draft appliances out of it, pull the bottom 2 flues out of the boiler, and the inspector would come in there and look in the boiler and see how much scale and corrosion you got going in there. And if he liked what he saw, he gave you a year and you could put your engine back together and run it. Well, taking the plow on and off an engine every year is a rather lengthy process. It takes like 2 or 3 days to get the plow off and to put it back on, because you literally jack the plow up, block it, and back the engine out away from it, you know. So it was decided to take the plow off the 87, put it on 488, because they had a few more years to go before it went on extension. So for 1981 only, the 488 ran with this wooden plow or wood beam plow. And it, this is the way the engine looked when it pulled the last San Juan in February of 1951 or January of 51. So it was kind of cool that we got to do that. The little car there belonged to a guy who is our caretaker and watchman that lived up at Cumbres in the section house all summer long back in the early 1980s. And he would take care of the repeater batteries for us and do that sort of thing till he got too old to do it anymore. And then he left and we had to take care of it ourselves. So anyway, here we are at the top of the hill there in the last week of May of 81 while the 88's getting watered up and about ready to come off the hill. Now in the spring of 81, the other thing that was going on is the Durango and Silverton was starting up. And several employees in Chama all jumped ship and went over to work in Durango. And that created a serious shortage of engineers. Two of the engineers went over there, and later a third one went. So we had to do something. One of the guys who was working there, George Knoob, who is a retired military guy, lived in Chama, and he'd been a fireman for several years, and he agreed to start running, but he needed practice bringing the trains down the 4% grade. He hadn't done much of that. So for about a week here in the end of May, we ran trips up and down the hill for George to do get training and running up and down the hill. And so we grabbed the consist that was used for the regular Chama train, which you see right here with all the wooden boxcars. In the center of it's the snack car and open gondola on the tail end there. And they're heading up the hill. At that time, they also decided that I needed a student trip firing. So they sent me out on one trip, and in fact, I'm firing the 488 here, and I'm very proud to say the safety valve's lifting, which is pretty rare at that time for me. But so we did this for about a week. Ran a trip in the morning, a trip in the afternoon, and got ourselves underway that way. Yeah, eventually they got a Rio Grande engineer from Alamosa, Jim Shawcroft, to come down and work for us for a while. And he worked for about a month. And then they hired a guy from the DOT test track that had run steam for the Rock Island. And he came out and worked with us for the summer. So that got us through the year. And so we could get other people trained up and running the next season. Here's yours truly when he had lots of long hair and a beard. This was probably after I came back from my student trip, which is probably why I'm not smiling. That's the, so, yes. In the end of last day of May, the 489 finally got a fire in it. And here it is sitting outside with the stack fan on top of it and smoke coming out in all directions as they get put the first fire in it and try to get the bugs out of it so it would be able to be put in service here for the opening of the season. And back then, the trains didn't start running till the second week in June, so which would have been around the 10th or so this year, if I remember. So we still had a week or two before opening day. It finally got brave and sent the 89 out on a test run. Jim Shawcroft ran the engine. I fired for him. And of course, we had to do something out of the ordinary. So we dragged a flat carload of ties with us. So we actually, we ran a work train for what it was worth. That's a superintendent and motor car operator and conductor, Gary Getman, walking around the engine there while we got water and checked around stuff on the other side. We turned it on the Y and put the load of ties on the tail of the Y back there and came off down the hill. July 3rd, we finally got brave enough to put the engine out on the train, and you'll notice it's already started to get dirty. It didn't last very long being clean. So here we got, I believe this was, yes, July 3rd, 1981, the 89 is getting ready to go out on its maiden voyage here. And here we go up into the Narrows. Whoops, too far. Let's back up that one. Going past the tank at Cresco, you notice that we didn't believe that you needed to spray for weeds back then. And it's quite different looking than the railroad looks today with all that deep ballast. You know, here we are through the weeds and not around them. You know, Cresco tank was looking pretty sad at this time too. It got rebuilt a couple of years later. And I don't know if there was any water in it then. If there was, there wouldn't have been very much because it leaked so bad. But I think it did have some water dripping out the bottom. We didn't use it for anything at that point. Trains were light enough with 12 boxcars that we didn't need to get water at Cresco and going up the hill. So we didn't ever have to stop and use this tank. Whoops, wrong way. Sorry about that. How about that one? Here we are going around Windy Point up here. This is shot from what was later been called Kodak Rock that sticks out from Windy Point. And I had looked up at that and went, I wonder how you get up there. And because it's pretty steep drop off on 3 of the sides, and the 4th side is just this gentle slope down to the highway. Oh, okay, let's walk up here and see if we can see something. And lo and behold, there we go. Head down the other side. A little while later, there's 488 coming up the hill through the weeds. My friends down in Phoenix here made me up some slides for the number boards for these things, and I think I just stuck those in there that morning. So I had to go take a picture of the engine going up the hill with the number slides in. It's Lobo Lodge in the background when it was still just a little hunting lodge back there, and they didn't care if you wandered down here and took pictures of anything. So I took a lot of pictures from this hillside here. And the present owners of all that stuff now would probably have you shot if you wandered out here, because they're pretty unfriendly toward everyone. Yours truly here on the back end of the train with the we didn't take the 0503 out very often. It didn't get out on very many charter trains or caboose charters. I set up a trip with some friends of mine down here in Phoenix, and they all came up and rode, and I convinced the management to let us take the 0503 out and promise not to hurt it and tear it up. But so there we are at Osier that afternoon. Now this was behind the Y along the old highway up at Cumbres. This is the remains of the lively general store and post office that used to be back here. You had a gas station, and there were some summer rental cabins back here that the lively family ran, and lived up here pretty much year round. You know, the father was the station agent for the Rio Grande there up through the 20s and 30s, and the whole family was up here. Now the Forest Service later came in here and tore all of this out and cleaned it all up. Apparently there was a underground gasoline tank underneath this pile of wood, like right in here where this roof was. And they decided that that was something that had to go away. So they dug it all up, removed everything, and there's absolutely no sign that anything was ever there anymore. I believe some of the remains of the cabins are still over there off to the right. In the fall of that year, we ran a charter train for a guy by the name of Bill Peter, who lived in Chama there and ran a model railroad business. And he ran a few charter trains through the years. This one was used our Jordan spreader. And we actually used it to do some work here as we worked our way east with it. Everybody'd get out and we'd back up and we'd throw the blades out and move some dirt and rocks around with it. This is at a place called Long Creek, about 2 miles west of Osier. Here we are looking straight down, going over Cascade Creek. We are at Osier back before they rebuilt the tank and several times and painted it a few times. This is the original Rio Grande paint because it was never painted yellow like the rest of the tanks were. It remained red-brown forever and ever. We stopped here for a quick bite to eat before we headed on to Sublette for the night. It's going down through Phantom Curve area, clearing the ditches. That fall, we did a movie shoot. This was for a PBS TV program called The Legend of Gregorio Cortez. All the equipment got littered for the Texas and Pacific Railroad. And the 489 got to be engine 488 or 489, depending upon what they wanted to do that day. And this was in the fall, right after the season was over. The car right behind the engine is an RPO car that it had a facade put on the outside of it several years before to make it look like a coach. So yeah, underneath that is the real RPO car. And the car on the back is that Mexican steel car that we called the Hinman. That came from the National Railways of Mexico. They spent about 10 days up there, filmed in Chama, filmed in Antietam, and outside of Antietam. Here we are spending the day up here at Lobato when the movie set building was still there. Engineer on this was Marvin Casillas, who still works for the railroad. That's Marvin right there. And we, at this point, determined that shooting movies was really a boring work. We spent about 7/8 of our time sitting around doing nothing, waiting for them to do something. Which is true of just about every movie job I've ever been on. You know, they're not an exciting way to make a living. After filming for several days in Antietam, we came back to Chama, and which was the last train movement across the railroad, and also turned out to be the last train movement that Scenic Railways would do on the railroad, as they got out of their operating contract at the end of the year, and the contract was passed to Scenic to Kyle Railways. But as you can see us coming down the hill, everything lettered TNPRR, including the caboose. One of these stock cars, well, actually all three of these stock cars, I believe, were actually owned by the operator, Scenic Railways, and they sold them off when they got out of the contract, two of which were sold to the Durango and Silverton. And for several years, a stock car lettered TNPRR sat up there, Tacoma. And every time you go by on the train, go, oh, there's our stock car. It's still here. And the RPO car off the rotary outfit train was in that consist. And yeah, picked up a flat car loaded with a front end loader to bring back with us. That winter, they started a program to build new passenger cars. They'd been talking about it for several years and finally got some funding together. These were designed by somebody other than the railroad. That's all I can say about that. They took 6,500 class flat cars and put platforms on them, cut through the side sills over here so they could put stairwells in them, and built a wood body over it. They actually, their workmanship here was quite good. There was several design flaws in what they did. The window sills were completely flat, so every time it rained, the water ran inside and rotted out a lot of the wood in there, and we had to replace that. They made they're behind the wooden siding here are steel reinforcing posts. Well, you can see it right here, and made the cars look like bulkhead flat cars with platforms on them. But because of the way they designed that, we got this minuscule little tiny doorway there that was less than it was about a little bit more than 2 feet wide. I know when I walked through it, I had to turn sideways because my shoulders wouldn't fit. But they built 7 of these things. And the first one, this was, I believe, this was the first one, or maybe it was the second one. But anyway, this is what the finished product ended up looking like in all its glory. Looking like something stolen from somebody's circus train. These cars were kept on the east end of the railroad. The operating format that Scenic started the year before was to run 2 trains a day, 1 from each end. They would meet in the middle, and the trains would go back the way they came, with the engines swapping trains and going all the way through. This was a change from the previous program, which was to run 4 days a week and run all the way through from one end to the railroad to the other, and then had bus transportation to take you back where you started. And what ended up happening with Scenic Railways is their bus fleet was wearing out because they didn't buy buses with diesel engines. They bought ones with gas engines, and just about every one of them blew up at the same time. And so they decided to get out of the bus business and just run trains for a living. So they came up with this 2-train format. And at that time, there was no way you could get a ticket to ride all the way across the railroad. You could ride from Osier, or ride to Osier from Antietam or Chama and back the way you came. That was all that was available. And Antietam felt they got the short end of that because there was less people ever in Antietam. So to make them happy, this new string of cars was given to that half of the railroad with the idea this will make your railroad ride better. They didn't really, but anyway, so there we have these guys here. They after we got the bugs worked out of them, they became pretty decent cars. We eventually had to change the springs to leaf springs to give them a better ride and to firm up the ride. One of the problems we found very quickly is that as a flat car, the car could twist and accommodate the changes in elevation in the track and in the curves. And when they put this big body on it, it stiffened up the whole works. And the first time we ran one, we came out of a sharp curve and promptly put the front truck on the ground because it rocked and picked up the wheel set on the leading truck. And the only way we could see to fix that was to loosen up the side bearings on one end, just like you do on your HO model railroad, where you got one screw tight and the other one loose. Well, that's what we ended up doing here to get these things across the railroad. And eventually we would, by changing and putting leaf springs under the cars, the the springs in the cars were better matched to the weight. Because these were 40-ton capacity cars. The trucks were 40-ton capacity, and we only had about 20 tons sitting on top of it. So they never even flexed the trucks as built here. So they didn't want to accommodate any of the curves. Also built that spring was a charter caboose. This was built by some local people who got together and formed a company to build a charter car for the railroad. They bought a boxcar number 3060 and hired a local guy that was an excellent carpenter who turned it into caboose 0306. And here it is getting rebuilt. Here, as I mentioned, Kyle Railways was now in charge of the railroad here and trying to get stuff done and organized, and so they could start running trains in the middle of June. And one of the first things that they got to deal with was a landslip that occurred here right below the Colorado and Mexico border out of Chama. I think I got a next one's more of a close up here. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, the highway through here, which is on the left, originally when it was just a 2-lane gravel road, was rather narrow and went up and down several times through here. But it had good drainage. The spring runoff and the rains coming down the hillside would hit the highway and run down to the nearest culvert, go underneath it, soak into the ground, and be gone. And when they built the new highway in the early 1970s, they made it all very flat and wide through there. So all of the water came down the hillside, struck the highway, and soaked in, and came out right here. When they discovered this here, they went out and filled this all in with dirt and rocks and came back the next morning and it had all slid out again. There was below down in here, the willows and the oak brush in here was getting ripped up out of the ground by the water coming out. That was coming out from underneath the track down here and running down the hill. So what we ended up doing was to pull the track over and just shoot fly around this thing here. And it was like that for the entire time I worked there after this. This got to be known as Kyle's Kink because this was the first thing they got to do when they showed up on the property. And it ended up looking like that. With a permanent 8-mile-an-hour slow order on it. Eventually, the highway department went in there and regraded the ditches on the uphill side of the road and solved the drainage problem, because the highway was having the same problems that the railroad was. Every spring, big chunks of it would slip out from underneath it. And eventually they got it straightened out and everything stabilized around the railroad. And after I left, they rebuilt the track and pulled most of that kink out of there and at least got rid of the slow order. But there was about 20 years in which it was causing trouble through here. Here we are in the spring of 82, and Kyle wants everything to look pretty, so we're out painting all the engines and looking good. And yours truly out here with his little paintbrush touching up the lettering on the 488. This is the deadhead move over to Antietam with the Antietam consist. We brought everything over and stayed in, it all stayed in Chama for the winters back then. Nothing was left over in Antietam. And so we're taking the Antietam consist over the hill. Right behind the 488, there's a boxcar that was the souvenir car at Osier. And it would get hauled in there every year. And behind that is all the Antietam Conses, which at that time was still all of the wooden box cars. None of the new ones over in, are in service yet. They were also starting on a big project to do concrete work to the mud sills of Mud Tunnel, as the whole tunnel was doing what its name says and sinking into the mud. So they had us haul several flat cars up the hill here, and at Cumbres the next morning they loaded it with sacks of cement that we took down to Mud Tunnel and unloaded, which took for hours. Got into Osier, or got into something close to midnight. Yeah, wasn't a great trip, but they realized that when they've assembled this whole train that we need to double head this. We don't have enough. It's too long. So this was like the first double header that had run in 2 or 3 years there. Because with the new operation, they essentially took their 20-car train and cut it in half and ran 10-car trains from each end. So they never had to double head anything out of Chama. But here's 488 with its new paint job, and 487 with some touch-up done to it, going up the hill with the deadhead move. At Cumbres, the 487 was cut off and came back down the hill light. Here we see it rolling downhill through Crisco. I got nominated to be engine watchman up there at the top of the hill, so I kept the 488 alive all afternoon till somebody came up there about 7 o'clock and said, I can go home now. But this was the next morning when we were getting ready to load the cars of cement. We're coupled up to a flat car here, and they loaded the stuff right on the highway. So we blocked the highway for 10 minutes while they loaded sacks of cement, and then we cleared up, let the traffic go through them and picked it up. And took a long time to load the cars as well. We are dropping down the other side. A friend of mine was up there, took pictures of this, and you can see the whole train right here with the carloads of cement, and then the Nito consist rolling along behind. Going across Cascade Creek Trestle. Now we went down there to Mud Tunnel and unloaded all that stuff, and then I think the flat cars ended up at Toltec siding, and the rest of the passenger train went on into town. And the guy who was the commission's civil engineer on contract decided that he had to do all of this concrete work right now before the railroad could run. Now we just ran a train through it a couple of days ago, but he decided to exercise his authority and forbid the trains from running through Mud Tunnel for about a week. So opening day was just in the first week was just a run from Chama to Osier and back. Of course, at this time, there was no way of turning anything at Osier, so we had to come back tender first. So here we are shuffling up the hill from Los Pinos, tank first. Did this for about a week until they got the line opened up, and then 488 was over there. It was kind of marooned by this whole thing, so it sat there, and 487 and 489 alternated running the train here. There we are at the top of the hill. Now 488 managed to, we finally got the drop pit running in the shop in Chama, and they decided to drop drivers, the front and back drivers of both 487 and 488, because the driving boxes need some serious work to them. And They put the one back together for the 488's number 4 driver and found that the axle was actually worn undersized to the point of being condemned, but we had no way of fixing that. So we went ahead and ran it. Now, one of the things when journals get undersized is they don't dissipate heat, and that bearing always ran hot. The number 4 bearing on the left side always ran hot, and we were having to change the grease sealer under that thing quite a bit. So they did some work, got it all ready to run, sent it over to Aunt Nito on that deadhead move, sat there for a week or so, and then came back. And on its very first trip back, they stopped at Sublette for water, and they noticed Babbitt dribbling out from around the driving box because it was that hot. So they had to limp the engine home, and we got it into Chama and dropped the number 4 driver. So we have the world's heaviest narrow gauge 262 here, while they reworked the driving box and the bearing and made it so it would run cooler. But it always still ran warm, and it would be another year before we had time to pull the thing apart and get a new axle made for it. So here we go. Here's 489 charging up the hill. You notice that we don't have any weeds growing in the track now. It's because they've decided to start spraying weeds. That's an improvement over things. Overnight shot I took in Chama. I had bought myself a set of Rio Grande class lights and was very proud of them, and stuck them on the engine here and did some night photography with it. Another day with the 489. Snow shed was a little bit bigger back then. We are back in Chama one afternoon here. I see my marked class lights are on the engine. I'm here. I was working as brakeman most of that second summer. And there's George and there's Russ Fisher. And we're back in town, which makes the question of who took the picture. So somebody gave me this one and they didn't bother to tell me who. So here we are, back in town in the afternoon, getting ready to turn the engine before tying up for the day. And it was a day that I chased the train in the backcountry between Sublette and in Osier. This is looking over the brim of the canyon down into Phantom Curve as the train works its way west toward Rock Tunnel. Got 2 of the new cars riding on the back of the train here. If I remember, these were shot with a 2X converter on a 205 millimeter zoom, which is why it's a bit on the grainy side, but it's zoomed way out there. And I didn't have a tripod, so I'm amazed I got much of anything with it. One of the things we got going in 1982 is we got the water tank to work. Up till that point, the engines were filled with garden hoses every night. And the tank had been reworked in the 70s sometime and had a liner put in about halfway up it. But no one ever hooked it up or got it functioning again. And we couldn't figure out why we couldn't, because we didn't know any better. And hooked up some plumbing in the frost box underneath the tank there, and lo and behold, water comes out. I was hooked up to the same line that went to the ash pit down there. And so we started filling the engines up and getting water here. This was a special day in the end of August. The Kyle people decided they would try to run some sort of a special fan trip kind of thing and marketed the day as a double header at a time when we never did double head. And they gave the guys, the passengers, a photo run at Lobato with both engines coupled together and went on up the hill. And I was fireman on the 488, which was the road engine over there. And 487 was the helper. Here we are. Lined them both up here to get water at the same time. And here we are on the train getting ready to go. Headed up the hill here. Different day. Wandered down through the oak brush here at Cresco Tank to try something different. Work train. This is the world famous 19 in its original interesting paint job that Scenic Railways had on it. It matched the station wagon that they owned that had the same paint job on it. That was interesting. But it's also shoving its maximum rated tonnage of 2 gondolas loaded with cinders. It would make about 6 miles an hour with that. That was all there was in it. And 2 180 horsepower engines running at 9,000 feet without a turbocharger doesn't give you much. So it was a slow walk up that hill, you know. But it did its thing. They fill up these gondolas at the ash pit and then head them up the hills and find a place to dump them. With that new piece of track up there at Kyle's Kink, there was always a place we could dump cinders. So that's where they're headed right here. As you can see, it's a lovely day. It's threatening to rain. And there was a day, a trip that was made with the experiment in black and white. I had never shot much black and white, but here we are headed east at Rock Tunnel in the afternoon. There's my friend Russ Fisher running the engine, headed back from Antietam the next day. You notice that the fireman's got her right up there at 200 pounds. Yeah, and the water's right here. Everything's just hunky-dory. Yeah, all is good with the world. I had a hard time getting these are done black and white negatives, and getting them to scan right was difficult. Yours truly gets water at Los Pinos one afternoon, taken from the open gondola. And the next day, running road engine on a double header with the 489. One tough looking kid there, like, geez, smile, smile, the world loves you. And another, this is going around the curve at milepost 337, halfway up the hill out of Chama, a big grove of oak brush here that the track goes through. Makes a neat picture. Now in September of '82 was the first National Narrow Gauge Modelers Convention that was held up in Denver. And they ran a special train over in Durango for it, but they kind of gave us short shift on this thing and didn't come over. So out of the kindness of our own hearts, we decided to set up a display of all the maintenance away equipment that normally lived up there in the north end of the yard next to the Gramps oil dock. So we pulled all this stuff out, stretched it all out on track 1 there in front of the station so everybody could take pictures of it. And actually some folks came up and said, hey, thanks for doing that. That's great. We liked it. So it's good. One of the things we did was stand up the pile driver like you see here. This hadn't been done in God knows how many years. And so we hooked up a air hose from the shop, and hooked it up to a glad hand up there. It was designed to run off steam from the engine. So we got 90 pounds of air and see what happens, got the machinery running in there. And it was all done with lever operated clutches and all this stuff. And that's how you stood the thing up. You pulled on one of these cables attached to the drum, and it hoisted the thing up in the air. Well, we rubbed the engine up and slipped the clutch in gear and got the thing halfway up and it stalled. Like, oh no, now what do we do? So I stood on the brake as hard as I could and released the clutch, and the thing came down with a mighty crash. And said, well, I guess we need to get a better, harder run at it, which we did. And the second time around, it actually stood itself up. We were thrilled. But so we did that. And I wasn't around to see it fold itself up. I don't imagine it was very graceful when it did that. You know, it would be many, many years later that the friends of the CNTS would rebuild the thing and get it so it would really function again. We also used the coal tipple way back when. Every day we went out there and loaded it up. This was a lovely day that these guys went up here and pulled on the chain here and started loading it with coal and went to close it off, and the whole gate system broke and fell off. And it continued to fill the tender. So it's like full of coal straight up all the way in there as far as you can see. And it's also about that deep in the cab. And I was walking home from work and saw these guys up here going, what are you doing? You're like, oh, shit. Also, it was a full moon. That's the moon over there. That's interesting. Yeah, they had a whole bunch of chicken wire here, or fencing they were going to try to put across this thing so they could shovel it all out and get the engine out from underneath it. Yeah. Bad day on the railroad. Double header up the hill in the fall of 82 with, don't know, that looks like, not sure what engines we got here. I think this is the 489 I'm on right here. But whole train full of happy people. Probably had about 18, 19 cars on it. The folks at Kyle were really, really good at marketing, and our patronage took off like a shot that year. The last year Scenic ran the train. The ridership was about 28,000 people. The first year Kyle was there, it went up to about 33, and it jumped up about 5,000 a year from then on. You know, they did a good job of marketing and bringing the people up there. This was a deadhead move back from Antietam to Chama on October 11th of 82. And as you can see, the weather was quite cooperative and snowing like mad as the 88 hustles west with its train. This is coming around the loop at Lava. There's an interesting, weird story about how all of these happened. There was this guy working in Durango who later went on to do great things. His name's Jeff Johnson. And everybody knows Jeff. He runs the show over there now. But in 1982, he was a lowly little fireman. And he was driving his pickup truck home from Durango to Oklahoma for the winter, and came through Chama the day before this train was going to run. And he said, I'd like, you know, and Russ Fisher and I were going to do something to chase this thing out through the sticks. And we came up with this interesting little deal where Russ drives his car to Cumbres, leaves it there. We all pile into Jeff's truck. We go to Antietam, chase the train all the way to Sublette. Jeff takes off for Oklahoma. Russ and I hop on the train and ride back to Cumbres. It worked, amazingly enough. So here we are, going around the loop at Osier here and past the tank. Boy, it looked a lot better than it does now, I'll tell you what. Yeah, although they're rebuilding it now, it probably is quite spiffy. By the time we got to Toltec Creek, the weather was getting a lot worse. Coming back down the hill through the kink. Now, one of the first things Kyle decided we needed to do was come up with a fourth engine. We were running the 487, 48, 49, and we needed a fourth engine. The 484 was the engine that was probably in the best shape sitting around there, but it desperately needed new driver tires. And so being frugally minded like we always were, they decided the concept of stealing the drivers out of one of the dead 490s on display in Antietam was the route to take. So after the season was over, it was decided to tow the 495 over to Chama so that it could have its drivers removed from it and put under the 484. Now, the engine was sat there right out on the end of that display track next to the highway for eons and had a short display train that you see right behind it there of a stock car, a reefer, and a dump gun, and a box car, and a pipe and a idler flat or a 6500 flat with a idler car on it. And so what we did when we got into town with the train is we turned the engine, got on the front of the regular passenger train in front of the depot and backed it all the way around the loop and coupled it onto that flat car and said, okay, start pulling. And, they dumped a bunch of oil on the 95 and took the rods off of it. But the engine apparently slid backwards for about 10 feet and with a mighty kabang started rolling. And we drug it out of here. And the shop crews did what they could to make the thing roadworthy. And after the season was over, we hauled the thing west to Chama. Now we're going to take this thing down the hill. We need some brakes because the 95's brakes are far gone. So this is we took the 489 up the hill with the Chama passenger train, set it out on the siding, and then ran the 89 light to Antietam to pick up the 495. So here we are at Cumbres, setting the train out here and starting east. The only time I could ever get a picture like that is when you're like running the engine by yourself and you can stop. We stopped for lunch here. What a great picture. This is great. So here we are headed back the next day, 89 and the 95 and the funky caboose on the back end, 05635, built out of a stock car of the same number, with as few modifications as humanly possible to make it into a caboose. But we stopped here to inspect the bearings on that 95 and continued on. Now, you got to have a spacing of 100 feet between engines going across Cascade Creek and Lobato. These three 6500 flat cars had been stashed in the siding here the year before when we hauled them in there full of concrete, if you remember. And they sat there for a year and a half. One of the reasons why they sat there for a year and a half is the commission had come up with a very bad plan of trading two of the 6500 flat cars to the Durango and Silverton for a tie tamper that they had. And the tie tamper never tamped a tie in its life, as far as I'm concerned. But they were going to come over and pick the two cars they wanted. So we took the three best cars we had and hid them at Toltec where they couldn't find them. So they sat there for a year and a half. And then we used them for this trip on the way back. Also, and there was another flat car between the engine and the caboose. Going around the curve at Los Pinos. We also picked up the souvenir car from Ogier on our way back. We were still kind of on pins and needles as both of these engines went across Cascade Creek Trestle. And the idea is you have to have enough space between them so they're not on the same span at the same time. That's what the spacing's for, the 100-foot spacing. And in 3 40-foot cars is 120 feet, so that works. But we crept out onto this bridge, and we had a big snow squall with thunder and lightning going on. And soon as the 95 went out onto the bridge, lightning hit the top of the hill right behind us with a loud bang. And there were some really scared people there for about 10 seconds till we figured out what was going on. It was like somebody saying, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this." Okay, so, next year again, here we are, we're getting things ready to go and spiffed up and looking good for what would have been the 83 season. There's 95 sitting over there on the left, and I think the drivers are out from under it. 488 finally got its new axle. This is its shiny new axle underneath the 488. Nobody's run up the adjustment nut on the driving botch wedge yet, but there it is, and it ran quite well like that. 1983, Kyle decided they wanted to open the railroad up Memorial Day weekend, and he said, "Well, okay." And we had a very, very wet spring, and the second week of May, there were drifts on Windy Point that were still 15 feet deep. And Rock Tunnel was full of ice, and there was a big drifted osier. So they said, "What do you want to do, boss?" And they said, "You got a rotary, go use it." I'm like, okay. So this is May 23rd, 1983. First time rotary OY had been used since about I think it was used in 1980 for a short trip. But 87 and 88's behind it, and I worked as fireman on this trip, and so I was real busy putting coal into this thing, so I got very few pictures of anything. This is coming around the curve at Coxo. And looking ahead, Jim Shawcroft's running the OY, Gary Getman's hanging outside there watching progress. Here we are after clearing the big drifted on Windy Point. Sam Roybal and Marvin could see us, Dale Martinez, Russ Fisher, George Knopf, myself, and Gary Getman. I don't know where Jim Shawcroft went. I think he went home. He said he'd had enough of it or something. He want to hang out with us anymore. The track up there at the Kink had decided to sink some more. So we ran a work train up here full of rock and the Jordan spreader, and we got the 489 out to pull it. And here we are up at the Kink here, spreading the cinders. This is the opening. Oh, this is the deadhead move. I've taken the Antietam consist over the hill with the 488. This is that's the old highway crossing at Coxo. And up at Cumbres in the snow. Now there are a lot of people, they always they talk about the crossing at Dalton. Well, I invented Dalton, honest. We were putting a lot of people on board the train there at that crossing. It became almost a regular flag stop because they were working on the highway between Chama and Santa Fe, and a lot of people were showing up late all the time. So we were always putting people on there. And someone, I think it was Gary, said, "Hey man, we ought to make a flag stop there. What should we call it?" Well, I got out an old Rio Grande timetable and found that there was a spur track called Dalton around the corner behind the train about 1/8 of a mile. I said, "Well, why don't we do that?" He said, "Okay, make up a sign." I'm like, "Okay, what do you want it made out of?" "We want to make a bulletproof sign. Make it out of steel plate, and we'll weld it to a piece of rail so no one will steal it, and the hunters won't shoot it." So I painted these up in my backyard, and we loaded them in the back of Gary's truck and drove up there and planted it in the ground. And here's the first train to go past it. I haven't even got it straight yet. So there's the first train at Dalton. Yours truly running the engine headed toward through Bighorn. I wasn't promoted yet. That would come later in the season. So whoever's the engineer is letting me run for him. This would be the day that I got promoted in July 16th, 1983. And I'm headed bravely out of town with the 489 and into the Narrows. And this was taken from the roof of the Cresco water tank, which was not a sane thing to do, but Steve Carr, I think, took this and gave it to me. And they rebuilt the tank and put a nice shiny, looked great, put a new roof on it, put all these brand new cedar shingles that were all neatly oiled up there, and they were slick as glass. You'd climb up there and you'd set yourself down and get your picture up there, because get your picture framed up. I did this once, and the engine came pounding up the hill and shaking that tank so much I started to shake myself off the roof. And I reached over and grabbed the centerpiece of the roof and hung on to that for dear life as my butt slid out from underneath me and the engine went by. Whoa, I think I'll do that ever again. There's a train coming into Sublette. This was the day that Gary and I went over and planted we made another sign up for Sublette, because the Sublette sign had been stolen many, many years ago when the Rio Grande was still there. So we went over and planted that there, right there. So that was the day that sign showed up. The original signpost was that hunk of rail right there. This was the evening before the first Rocky Mountain Railroad Club trip in 1983. They hadn't run a train. Rocky Club hadn't run any trips there since the 70s sometime. I think it says Scenic Railways just didn't want to do it. And the Kyle folks said, yes, we do want to do this. So this was Labor Day weekend in September of 83. And we set up this night picture session here. I saw this scene like 2 days before. The guys had come up there and they were still using the coal tipple, and they topped the engine off in the dark. And the cool part was the headlight perfectly lights up the water tank. And I thought, wow, there it is. There's the picture to get. And so we set up the night shot at the coal tipple like this. Turned out really cool. I'm really happy with that. This is the Rocky Club trip. We're in the hole at Toltec, and just pulled to a stop. And here comes the 87 with Jim Shawcroft running, comes steaming around the curve. We could have had a moving meet here without any trouble. We could have kept shuffling around the corner and line the switch and gone right out the other end without even stopping. Like that's pretty cool to be able to get a meet like that out in the absolute middle of nowhere without radios. This is on the Y at Bighorn, turning the freight section. We had these cars behind the engine up through the Gone, and then we had boxcar coaches, or maybe we didn't. I don't remember. Okay, you had we had this little 3-car freight train. That's what we had with the boxcars behind it. And we got to Bighorn, left the coaches on the siding and turned the freight cars, and then did a quick run by of just the freight equipment. Boxcar 4444 was a personal project of mine that I did. I decided we needed to have a pre-1925 DNRG boxcar, and it had been a maintenance away car. But I said, well, okay, if you notice it, it's shorter than a regular 3000, and it's a little bit skinnier too. In the fall, we ran another trip for Bill Peter. Engine 482, 89 turned into 482, and 487 turned into 481. And this train was unique in that it was the first mid-engine helper to run over Cumbres since sometime in the mid-1960s. Here's Russ and I parked here. Actually, we're shuffling into the Narrows here, headed, the 487 was about 10 cars deep, like so. Friend of mine shot these and gave them to me, We are stopped for water at Cresco. And pulled up for the helper engine to get water. Yours truly, running the 489, yanking the throttle out wide open as we left there. Coming around Windy Point. On the way back, here we have a whole bunch of loonies climbing all over the rocks at Rock Tunnel, which is always a fun thing to watch, particularly the guy that's got to get out on the very far end out there. And anybody out to recognize themselves. Trip back, only had one engine. Train went down, spent the night at Sublette. Set the train off, took the engine down to Bighorn, turned it on the Y, and came back and camped for the night there. At the end of the 83 season, we ran a Jordan spreader trip all the way across the railroad and back, cleaning ditches. This would have been the end of October, around the 28th or so. And fortunately still had some good weather, and took the 19 and crawled our way up the hill with it, and then went on to Antio and back and ran that engine hard for 3 or 4 days, and it was the best that thing ever ran. He just wanted to get some good exercise. Here we are. This is at Toltec Creek, the fill over Toltec Creek, going into Calico Cut. That's Max Pacheco watching the proceedings. This is coming down in, well, actually that would be the main line going past Lava Tank right up there. So we're down below lava, clearing the, this is a good job of cleaning the sagebrush away from the track too. You can use it as a lawnmower. That winter, they started doing boiler work on the 484 to get it rebuilt. And here's the shop crew down here working on, they're swedging the ends of the flues down to a smaller size for installation in the firebox. That's what the flue looks like after you run it. There's a die right in here that squeezes the end of the tube down, and it's a big air hammer on top. They heat the tubes up in this oven right here, which is run by propane. You can see it glowing in there, and you get the tube up to white hot practically and stick it in there and rotate it while you bang on it with the air hammer. And that's what reduces the diameter down like this. The driving boxes, I don't know if those are I think those are going to be the ones out of the 84 that are going to be rebuilt and put under the 495 here. It looks like we've melted Babbitt off the surfaces here. These were the 484's old drivers parked outside, and you can see the sharp flange on that one. That was the number 1. And you can see the double tire on this one back here. That's the number, that's the number 3. That's the main driver. You can see the the outside ridge there. .487 was getting a boiler inspection over the winter. It was still on flue extension. So we have it completely stripped down to a bare boiler. And this is all its guts loaded on this flat car here. We got the sand dome, there's the steam dome, and that's the throttle valve. And it's the spool for this throttle. It's the cyclone and stuff that go into the front, and air tanks and boiler jacket, and it's big giant kit. Here we are. Every spring we had to get back up there to the state line and dump more cinders, because that's what we did every year. Now we'd go up there, Russ and I'd go up there and watch that, saying, well, let's see, when are we going to get called back to work to run work trains? Because we'd be laid off in the winter. And we are heading up the hill with one of the regular trains in July of '84. Found a nifty rock out here. This is between the two road crossings uphill from this present highway, with a big rock about this big that sticks out from the railroad. And I thought, oh, this would make a good picture. Let's try that. So we did that. Later on, this is headed down to Los Pinos toward Osier. This is as far as you can drive. There's a fence here. You go down Apache Canyon Road, you make a left turn and head down along the Los Pinos River, and you can walk this far. There's Los Pinos foam shed right there. And you can get this way, and it's about 1.5 miles to Cascade Creek from here. So you could walk to Cascade Creek Trestle from here if you were so inclined. But this was as far as I got that day. This was a special run, I believe, for one of the National Narrow Gauge Conventions. I have to look at my notes. 489. We had a mixed train of freight cars and with passenger coaches, boxcar passenger coaches on the tail end, and headed up the hill here. Russ running across Cascade Creek. Now you can see what we got here. You know, coaches here and some handful of freight cars and an open gondola there. This train went down to Bighorn, turned and went back. So here we are sitting in the siding at Bighorn waiting for the afternoon passenger train headed back for Antietam, which is right here. Coming back in the afternoon, the sun's setting here at Cascade Creek, getting late in the afternoon. And another crowd of crazy people. The final deadhead again headed back toward Chama, and October 15th of 84 stopped here at Osier. Now there was no dining hall here way back at this time. That wasn't built till 1989. So everyone was still fed out of the section house and got to sit in picnic tables in nice weather like this. Water tank, I managed to get a coat of yellow paint on it though. And back in Chama the next day, doing the last bit of switching before shutting everything down for the winter. It was 489, waddling around ankle deep in the snow. In the spring of 85, we had a quickie motion picture movie TV commercial we did, and it was done before we ran any deadhead moves or anything. And this was that train up there below Lobato, where the big pond forms in the springtime. Kyle Railways learned their lesson the year before and pushed the opening day back to mid-June. They decided that running the rotary every year was not something we wanted to do if we could avoid. here we are up there, state line in all its glory after a winter of water trying to run underneath it. We had it like this every winter. You can see where the ground is split away right through here, and the whole thing is just sloughed off and settling down the hillside here, and completely slipped away from the ties right here. So work train time, 488, nice shiny paint, and they're loading up cars of river rock to haul up there. I think we loaded up 7 cars, and you can see the weather's pretty crummy here. It rained on those cars all night long and soaked up all of that nice river rock, which was mostly sand and rocks and gravel, and added another 1.5 tons of water to it, and which the 88 then had to shove up the hill with wet and snotty track. And I have never put so much coal in an engine as I did that day. We worked the doo-doo out of that thing. It was on its knees the whole way and stalled twice and had to back down and take a run in. It was quite a spectacular show. Here we are going up around the hill curve here. This is above Lobato. Lobo Lodge is around the corner there. Firemen made it. Yay! There we are, parked there. Even put markers on the back of the tender. Oops. How did that one get in there sideways? And now we're upside. Oh, I'm sorry. That's me doing that. There, wrong button. There we go. Now, I don't know how many people have seen this. This is just downhill from the state line. This is the 489's original cab. In the spring of 1926, when the engine was less than 6 months old, it was coming down the hill from running a helper job and hit a broken rail on the curb and went over the side and rolled over 1.5 times before coming to the ground, grinding to a halt down there. Engineer got killed. Firemen managed to survive and ended up working into the 1960s. But this is the engineer side of the cab. You can see there's the blue flag holder water bag hook right here. It's folded in half. That's the bottom of the engineer's window. It's folded in half over itself here. And this would be the front of the engineer's window right there. I think these bushes have grown up so much you can't see this. You used to be able to see it from the train if you knew where to look, particularly in the springtime before all of the leaves got on everything. But spring '85, we finally got the 484 back on its feet and running, and here we are firing it up for the first time. And posed for its semi-official portrait. It had a town at Duke's Tree. This was been its first trip. Oh, different day. Let's go back to that. Yeah. Cresco tank in the rain. There's another special we ran for Bill Peter, which was a work train with the construction derrick on it. This is leaving town. And out on the road here, well, looks like yours truly running there. Yeah, around the curve at Coxo. And up at Cumbres. Yours truly enjoying lunch. We never got a time, you know, they'd come up and give you something to eat. So here, run the train while you're eating. It's like, okay, there you go. Yeah. This is shot from way up on the rocks above Windy Point. This is Kodak Rock down here. These guys are sitting on top of Kodak Rock. I'm on Windy Point behind it, and thought this would make an interesting place to hike to. I ended up hiking up from up the backside of Windy Point from Cumbres to get up here. Here we are, 484 coming around the hill. This was another, I'm not sure whose trip was it. This was another National Narrow Gauge Convention or what, but it looks like the same kind of consist with freight cars and passenger cars. We're making a photo run here at Lobato. By the way, that is the last remaining Rio Grande station sign on the railroad. And how it managed to survive all these years and somebody not stealing it is beyond me. This is pulling out of Cresco. Oop. Going through a Cresco siding on another day. And coming around Windy Point. Now they ran a work train to Antietam one day, hauling a bunch of ties, I think, or flats. I think they're going to load them full of ties. And these guys got out of town really early. See, I'm up in the Narrows here, and the sun hasn't even thought of shining. This would have been in early October. And I ran the regular train out of Chama that day, and I wonder where we were gonna end up going. They took this stuff all the way to Antietam and then ran the engine back. So here's these guys charging up the hill here. By the time they got up to Cumbres, there was snow on the ground. This was that afternoon. I'm at Sublette, just pulled into a stop here, and here came the 88, came poking its way around the curve on the siding. It headed back. Okay, now I got a few extras that I threw in here at the last minute that we just had to have. This is the Indiana Jones movie train with the 484 all dressed up, lettered for the Pueblo and Chalma Railroad. All the freight cars in their movie attire on the back end there. An amazing looking train. Actually, it'll look pretty cool. You know, if there was ever a circus train on the narrow gauge, it would have looked like this. I like the giraffe sticking their necks out of the stock car back there. That was a nice effect. Nobody knew how they loaded them in there, but you know, that wasn't the point. Now, here we are up at Lobato one afternoon doing the filming, and we've got Steven Spielberg here, and George Lucas, and Harrison Ford, and the late River Phoenix here, all waiting for something to happen, which generally took a while. It was funny. I came down and I took this picture, and then one of their many assistant directors came walking up to me and said, "I want your camera." I said, "Why?" He says, "Photography is not allowed." I said, "Well, it's my train." I said, "Well, no, you can't take pictures. I want your camera." And I said, "Look, I'm going to take pictures for the railroad here, and if you don't like it, I'm going to take my train and go home." And the guy believed me, and he walked away. He walked away, and Spielberg climbed down off the car and said, "Is that guy bothering you?" And I said, No, we've got things sorted out." And I said, "Good." And I hate to have a problem. I said, "Okay." Well, we were sitting in the siding here waiting for the passenger train out of Chama. And so they're sitting around up there. And he asked me, "So what are we doing here?" I said, "We're waiting for the passenger train out of Chama." He says, "Oh, is it like an Amtrak train?" I said, "No, it's got one just like we're using here in passenger cars. It's how we make a living here, is hauling people." So it's got a real steam engine on it too. I said, yeah. And he yelled at his guy running the $1 million Panavision 70mm movie camera. He said, turn that thing around and shoot this train going by. I want it for my own stuff. And then said down the road, said, hey, you, the sound guy, I want to roll sound with this too. So, you know, he's got, there's somewhere there's a great run by from top of the train of 489 charging up the hill past him at Lobato. I wonder if anybody ever got to see it. That was pretty cool. This was in 1990, 1990? Yeah, February 90. We got the 88, did a bunch of work on it and wanted to fire it up and run it and see what happened here. And we came up with this brilliant idea of running our own flanger train and calling up everybody we could think of and telling them to come up here and watch this or ride on it because we're going to run the engine and we're going to go plow snow and all that sort of thing, even though we didn't have a plow on the engine. And so we went up and had a good time for the day here. But you can see 88's plowless, but if you'll notice, the flangers drop down and it's kicking up snow right there. So it's doing its thing, leaving a good looking rail behind them there. Here was another day. When was this? This was in 94. We did a deadhead move over the hill and 463 was the helper. And had some strings of dump guns of cinders that we hauled up there and came back down and dropped it someplace. And we're up at Cumbres getting ready to head home with it. And here's somebody's fan trip, probably Jim Trowbridge ran this one with a 463 on it. They're below low lodge where you can't stand anywhere because the people there get mad. And I think that's right about the end. Oh, one more, last one. Here we are in 1993. This was the year of the big snow up there. This was in the middle of June. And 89 comes through this cut, which a month ago was about here and went all the way across the track. As you can see, we had to make sure that nobody stuck their heads out the window when we went through here, or it would have removed your head without even thinking about it. It was that close for a while. Yeah. And that should be the end. I believe you're right. So there we go. Life on the CNTS in the early 80s. So
Earl, you got time to take some questions?
sure. Whatever you got. Somebody's got to have a question. It can't be that good. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have questions in the house, raise your hand. I'll bring you a mic. Otherwise, everybody in TV line won't.
Hey, Earl, real nice to know, thanks, Chip here. How come you left the cats?
Say that again.
Why did you leave the Cumbres and Toltec?
Why did I leave it? Well, I grew up. To put it politically correct, I had a couple of things. The big thing that kicked it off, Kyle Railways left because the owner of Kyle Railways retired. He sold the company, and the owners, the guys that bought it, were not interested in running the CNTS. They weren't really interested in running any kind of excursion train, let alone one that didn't make much money. Because Kyle never made a whole lot of money. They ran it mostly because they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And so the company that took it over was not very, how do I say this? They wasted a lot of money, okay? Spent a lot of money on things that, and we're doing things that I knew wouldn't work. We tried before and like, no, this isn't really a good idea. This is not going to work. And did a whole bunch of stuff and special events that were failures and all this, and spent a whole lot of money and basically didn't want to listen to anything I had to tell him after being there for nearly 15 years. And I realized that this guy's got a 20-year contract on it. He's going to run it into the ground. He's going to destroy everything that I worked on in all the years I was there. So I decided I really needed to go someplace else. That and my wife at that time had some serious health problems that couldn't be taken care of in Chama. I needed to move to a bigger town. And those were the two reasons that I finally decided I had to go. You're welcome.
We throw you those softball questions, sir. Jason, here have something for, and also if you're on the Zoom call, can they unmute themselves and ask a question?
I'll have to figure that out. I broke it.
Well, okay. If you're on Zoom, maybe there's a way you can find a little indicator that shows that you want to raise your hand or something like that. Anybody else here in the house have a question? You gave such complete answers, Earl, that
I know that's amazing. I guess I just
you're sitting down because you're amazing. Oh, yeah, let me bring you I'm bringing the mic to you. Don't go away.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I'm just dazzled by the photography, the presentation, our recollection. It was really swell.
Wow. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing what Photoshop will do to a picture. You know, when I started scanning slides, I go, why are all my slides crooked and underexposed? You know, and so fortunately, Photoshop does great things for that. You know, and wow, these actually look halfway decent when I got done with. How about that? So,
hey, Earl, I was thinking you mentioned the Hinman car early on, and I think if I remember, it's still the loop now. And Phil Johnson said it was so heavy they call it the Hindenburg.
Yeah, we called it the Hindenburg. Yeah, that and the fact that it derailed and was a big disaster.
And a few minutes ago, I can remember the name that they call it now, but I can't. But they do use it occasionally out there. I don't think they use it regularly.
Yeah, when they took it to Georgetown, I thought, oh my God, they're going to derail it on the bridge. Oh God, no, you don't want to do this. But I guess it manages to stay on the track there now. But the problem with that old car was, it was from Mexico, and it had regular passenger car trucks under it then, and then it came over here, and it was just a body. Or no, it had narrow gauge freight car trucks from Mexico, but they had 33-inch wheels under it because Mexico uses standard gauge coupler height on their narrow gauge equipment. So I was like, well, I don't know, this isn't going to work. So they scrounged up a pair of heavy duty Bettendorf trucks, off of like a 6,500 flat, and stuck them underneath this thing, and again, they had 80 ton or 40 ton capacity trucks under it, and the first bunch of curves that went around, it went on the ground. And so they ended up taking and loosening up the side bearings on one end, and then completely removing the side bearings on the other end. So when it went down the track, it made you seasick. It was rocking back and forth and back and forth, and you didn't dare go more over 12 miles an hour with it. And I remember one day taking it over for a movie job, and it went on the ground 3 times in one day. And I said, I am never going to have it, no. I'm
sure they were glad to see that happen. Throws off their day. I think now it's called the Waldorf. That kind of came back because they try to name things for some things in the neighborhood of their own. So, well, gosh, thanks for sharing your Tuesday evening with us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm glad to do it. It was fun.
Next time you come up with another batch of pictures, you'll have to let me know.
Yeah. Well, this whole bunch was the result of not having anything to do during COVID. So, Yeah.
Those out in Zoom land, I think changed now so you can unmute yourselves. If anybody out in Zoom land has questions.
All right. Anything else for you guys?
Andy's just checking to see if anybody out in Zoom land would ask.
Yeah, I see like 3 people still out there, so.
Yeah, this is Andy. I also noticed, just per chance, I don't know that I saw any pictures of Lobato Trestle in all your photos there.
Well, you know, Lobato's such a crummy place to take a picture unless you hike down into the canyon and look up at it from the upstream side. And I did take some black and whites there at one time, but you know, it was, if I was out taking pictures during the regular train, it would take you 20 minutes to walk in there and walk out. Meanwhile, the train's halfway up the hill. And so I never wandered back in there to take pictures. There was a picture of me running the 489 way back before I got promoted. And that was actually taken on the uphill side of Lobato Trestle by some friends of mine who hiked across the bridge and took pictures of the doubleheader coming across there. But that's about the only pictures I got. You know, like I said, I got some black and whites somewhere, but I never shot slides down in there.
All right, well, thanks for doing the show for us. And Earl, if there's any way you could be up here on May the 19th, you could join us at the picnic. I meant to talk about the picnic earlier. I'm guessing everybody here in the room and on Zoom got your newsletter that talks about our picnic. Last year it happened to be on Mother's Day, and that kind of hurt our attendance, but we'd love to see you guys with us out at the Railroad Museum on the 19th. It's the Sunday after Mother's Day this year. We are encouraging everybody to sign up and use your credit card online. If you're desperate to write a check, Keith might take one from you, but we're trying to get you guys to do it online.
That's before the picnic.
Yeah, and we need to have everything turned in by about May 10th. You know, we need to have a few days of lead time for our barbecue guy. You have your choice of brisket or pulled chicken.
Yeah, make sure they email in their choices for that.
Yeah, we need you to email in your choices for food and check our website for how to sign up for this. And question? Okay. I know you guys get rowdy and they all start talking and I can't tell if I'm talking to myself. Anyway, if everybody would be nice enough to hang up your chairs, that'd be great. And if anybody had a minute or two to rewrap all those things that got unwrapped,